Hello and welcome to the Wellness Connection podcast. My name is Fiona Kane. Today I've got another guest and we're going to be talking about a therapeutic music application, and I'm sure our guest will tell us exactly what that is. So today we have Angela Sciberras. Hi, Angela.
Hi, Fiona. Thank you so much for having me on. This is absolutely fantastic.
So tell us a little bit about you, a bit of your background, and why am I talking to you about this topic today?
Absolutely. Thanks again. Lovely to be here. Lovely to be welcomed, and can't wait to chat with you about things that I'm very passionate about. So, my day job, you see me like Superman and Clark Kent, my day job, my Clark Kent is kinesiology. So, I've been working as a kinesiologist for just on 20 years. I started in neurolinguistic kinesiology, then went in and learned neurotraining, a whole completely, it's based in kinesiology practice, but also, other areas and other focuses in the nervous system. And then went on to something called Resolve Beyond Neurology. So 20 years of experience, thousands of clients and client session times. That's been my passion in life, or one of my big passions is working with people in that way. But my former life before coming to kinesiology was a musician. So I did a music degree. I have a bachelor's degree in music, and I was a solo flautist actually. Had my own, own random dreams of becoming the next Jane Rutto, except not naked on a piano. So I loved flute and played in SBS Orchestra for a period, on and off. Played in lots of ensembles and things like that. And it was actually an injury due to playing that brought me to kinesiology itself, which is interesting.
Yes.
Yeah. So mostly that's what I do in life, is just really passionate about helping people. Love the arts. Spend a lot of time in creative fields and music in particular, which has
Yes.
led me to what we're going to talk about today.
Mm. Okay. Yeah, it's an interesting background, and so I didn't know that you played the flute. I didn't know those things. So there you go.
Mm.
So
Yeah.
learn
So
something new.
yeah, well, flute was before I had an RSI injury in my second year at uni. Flute was like an extension of my body, and I think when I had that injury, it was almost like a dying, coming to the point where I realised that I couldn't play to the intense capacity that I was playing at the time. With, just, as you could imagine, at university and playing to the level that we were practicing, doing all sorts of certifications and things like that. It was a lot of pressure on the body and stress on the body. And I think too, in those days, we're talking, sort of, more than 20 years ago, there wasn't a lot of understanding of how to practice effectively without injuring yourself. I think nowadays it's a lot better. We've got so much more understanding and knowledge about how to, you know, um, how to actually practice without over practicing, without injuring our muscles and tendons and things like that.
Yeah, yeah. So that's what I was
Um,
going to ask. Is it like a shoulder or a neck sort of arm thing, or what's?
yeah,
Yeah.
well, for me, it was actually that position. You imagine you're holding that position. It was actually a wrist thing, and I think the combination of playing a lot of hours a day, sometimes 6 or 7 hours a day in ensembles and practice work, personal practice work, but also it's the combination of practicing and stress. So there was often a lot of pressure to be, practicing pieces that were extremely difficult. And to this day, interestingly, when I pick up the flute and I play particular pieces, whether it be Telemann or certain, extremely complex pieces from, the 19th century or classical pieces, it's like my body has a memory, and I'll start to have a little bit of aching in my wrists again, like the body's thinking, oh no, not this stuff again. But I can pick up folk, I can pick up jazz, improvisation, and play for countless hours and not have any pain. So it's really interesting that, I must have a balance about that. Note to self, I need to have a balance about that as well, because it's something that, the body actually, keeps the score, and it
Yeah.
remembers that stress.
Yeah.
So moved from less flute playing into a little bit more multicultural sort of world music type of ensembles, playing everything from Korean music to Javanese music to you name it, African at the time, and a lot more percussion, moving away from flute a little bit just to give that, help the body to actually heal.
Yes.
And it was around that sort of tail end of university that I had an experience with my grandmother that started to have me think about music as a healing modality. So I think I'd always been a performer, addicted with the stage, and even, I still love speaking and performing and things like that. But it was my whole world, was getting up on stage as a soloist and performing, and coming to sit with my grandmother as she died and playing music for her had me start to think, there's something more to this. There's something more than it being something that's enjoyable, and it is. There's something more to it than being entertaining, and it is. There's something that's intrinsically and innately healing. So sitting with her and watching the way that her body went from being, just a vegetable in the chair, you're, not responding to my father and I. We were sort of playing some Irish jigs. He played the guitar and I played the flute. And for a moment, you could almost imagine that she wasn't dying, that she, it's like, like a marionette or a puppet. And the music began to take over her body. Obviously, she was part Irish, so we're playing these. And it was like, I'm thinking, oh my goodness, like it's like a second wind, or where is this energy coming from? Where is this ability to get up and almost dance? And both my father and I were just blown away by how the music actually animated her and almost it gave her back to us for a period of time. Yes, she did go downhill much quicker after that and passed away, only a few days after that. But we never thought we'd have that type of interaction with her again.
Yes.
And I think that's what I became fascinated with, like the power that music could have to actually be able to, give people an opportunity to reconnect with their loved ones, and in a way that they may not be able to. So it's quite extraordinary.
We played music for my mother, not as in played the instruments, but just had my
Yes.
phone and played music. And my mother, she was quite heavily medicated, so that I didn't get any response from it. It wasn't really about that, but I feel like it would have been quite soothing for her, and
Yes,
hearing
it would.
familiar music. And it was actually probably soothing for all of us. So we were kind of playing, it was like all these sort of lovely sort of 70s Bee Gees and ABBA and songs like that
Yes.
that we used to love and that we sort of grew up with. So we just played that sort of music for her. And I like to think that would have been helpful for her, even though she wasn't able to say so.
It would have been. It would have been. And we learn, once I went into learning the clinical application of music, so then becoming more interested in, well, how can we apply music in such a way that's more intentional, but also quite intuitive in that connection with a person, particularly when they can't, like your mother, she couldn't tell you whether she was enjoying it, but, we learn other ways of being able to tell whether someone is still stressed, whether they're upset, whether it could be the color of their skin, a grimace on their face, the way that they're holding their fists, whether they're holding the sheets really tightly, all of these things, the rise and fall of the chest, if they're on, often in palliative situations, they're not, but if you're in an ICU or with neonates, which I've spent some time with neonates, you've got all of the machinery which help you to see blood oxygen levels or their heart rate. And so you can literally watch as you play to see, their oxygen levels improving.
Oh,
Yes,
wow.
their heart
I
rate
didn't
is,
even think about
yes.
that. Wow. Okay. That's
Yes,
amazing.
so yeah, that's right. We can circle back around to a little bit more about that in a moment. But yeah, so after that experience with my grandmother, I became fascinated and I started to look around sort of Australia around certifications or training that one could do to learn more about how to apply music in that way. And at that time, we were sort of still looking at music therapy was, and still is a very respected and highly effective degree that people can do here in Australia. And I I went to the Golden Stay, which is in Penrith at that time, and they've still got wonderful training there for people who wish to become music therapists. But their focus, I'm not sure whether it still is, but at that time their focus was very much on music for people with disability, children often, or those kind of applications where you can make a real difference to people like that. But I surprised myself that I really wanted to go down the path of palliative. I was passionate about the effect that it could have in the moments for people who were dying. And it just didn't light me up to, as much as, don't get me wrong, it's amazing work that people do with children with disabilities or all sorts of different, brain injuries or different, amazing. But that just wasn't where I felt my fascination around that deathbed, sitting at the deathbed. And there was nothing really at that time in Australia that would address that type of training. So just by it was sometimes I think synchronicity, the power of synchronicity. I connected with a lady who wanted to learn flute. I'd actually put a sign up in the local shopping centre to say that I was teaching flute. She came for a flute lesson, and just so happened that she was the first person in Australia to be doing an online. Now, back in the day, people thought it was, so unprofessional. Can you believe? We're talking back in 2005. So unprofessional and Mickey Mouse, and to do a course online.
Yes, yeah. It was
And
different in those days, wasn't it? It was all very new.
exactly. It was very new. And my late mentor, Stella Benson, I'll show you. This is her book, actually. The
Yes,
Healing Musician, for anyone, hopefully you can see that there, for
yes,
anyone who's interested in learning more about it. She has a wonderful a book about her work. So she was a bedside musician, and she'd created something called the International Healing Musicians Program, and she ran online programs. Yes, it was online, but it's early days online, so not like we could do something like this with Zoom, which was extraordinary. It was all, yes, there was the emailing, and there was an online site where you could do, the assignments and things like that, but it was all via phone, basically. So everyone would connect up to a conference call, and we could do the certification. So this beautiful woman named Julie Webb, actually, I have to credit her because she came in to learn flute, but little did I recognise that she was a harpist, number one. And number two, she was the first person in Australia to be completing what was called the International Healing Musicians Program. And oh my goodness, like, you can't make that up where someone comes to your house for a music lesson and literally they're doing the course that I was seeking. And that focus really was on deathbed palliative care. So that's where coming into the certification all started. It's amazing. From there, speaking with Stella Benson, who unfortunately has passed away in the last few years, we made a deal. So at the time, I couldn't afford to do her course, but we made a deal. I said, part of my university degree was event management. And I said, I'm a very effective event manager. Let me curate an event here in Australia, a symposium of sorts, and we'll bring you out to run workshops with musicians. I'll do all of the work if you will put me through the training. I'll bring you out here. We'll sell tickets for these things. We'll get all your expenses paid, and we'll do
So
this
where was she
exchange.
based?
She was in the US.
Oh, okay. I
Yeah.
must have missed that when you said that. So
I may not have even said it, so apologies if I didn't. So she was in the US.
yes.
She was based in America, and obviously in America there's, then and more so now even, there's a very rich base of therapeutic music application. It's certainly different to a music therapist, but lots of harpists. Their hospitals actually have harpists, and they sometimes have huge full-size gold harps in cardiac wards. They're paid really well to do their jobs. Sometimes there's 2 gold harps in surgery while, they're applying it. There's degrees called music thanatology, which is the study of death and dying in music. And they work with universities and hospitals that integrate them clinically into the fabric of the hospital system.
Yes. Yeah.
And unfortunately, Australia still hasn't quite caught up
Yeah.
with that, although we're doing better and better. But at that stage, it was brand new here, that way of working. One-on-one, very specific one-on-one type of work with people, and truly starting to understand a lot of the old and even ancient ways of working with music, where we can use tone, texture, different modes, maybe ancient modes, understanding how the modes affect the human body, and then being able to intuitively apply them at the bedside for the good of the person at the time.
So what does different modes mean?
Okay, so different modes. So modes are like keys. So if you imagine those of you out there who aren't musicians, a lot of the musicians who are listening would know what a mode is. They're like simplistic versions of a scale. And you would remember, you might have seen a musician play a scale where they play C to C, da 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 da, da, like this type of
Yeah.
thing. So a mode is almost a shortened version of a scale. And these modes can go right back to 11th century, very old history of very old English modes or Gregorian modes, and understanding how these different modes or sounds affect the body. So major modes, what in the West we would call like happy sounds, or minor modes, where the minors, they sound a little bit sadder, the minor modes. So we would look at modes like merry modes. If I came into a room and, you could be a couple of little old ladies having a cup of tea and they just needed a lift. Like they might not be necessarily in pain or unwell, but they might be a bit down that day. So you might come and sit with them while they have their cup of tea and play some merriment modes, which the way that the Western ear, obviously that's different for other cultures, because they're going to hear different things in different modes. But for us in the West, when we hear a minor mode, it's often like sad songs and things like that. Merry modes, they're the uplifting, things like that. So we would start to understand the different types of modes, the different keys, the different sounds that affect the body. I know I feel really uplifted when I listen to this particular song, and that's often got a lot to do with the key or the mode that song is in.
Yeah, it's funny because I'm a really big music fan, and anyone who watches or listens to this podcast will know that I drone on about music at different times, and
Yes,
the latest music I like or the lyrics I love or whatever. But
yes,
music really does affect my soul, but I've never. It's funny. I'm sort of had this vague awareness of music therapy in the background of my brain, but I've kind of never really stopped and thought about exactly how that is, but it makes sense to me based on how I feel and how I can feel joy from music, or I can feel calm from music, or I can be crying, put a song on and be
yes,
crying, whatever it is.
yes.
So that does make sense to me, but it's kind of like I just never really just stopped and thought about it as much as I have at this moment, I suppose, because I've
Yeah.
never had
How?
the time to think about it. But now you're sort
Yes.
of beginning to explain it. So that makes sense.
It makes sense. That's right. And we've got these skills. Musicians back in the day, they would have been used, particularly if you look at this picture here on Stella's book, you can see, hopefully without any shine there, you see it's a very old piece of artwork, but you can see the gentleman here. Obviously, he's not looking very well. I don't know if that's an angel, could be.
Yes.
And then here, of course, we've got the harpist. And
Yes.
so, the lyre players or the harpists would have been brought in to relax or to uplift or heal. I think ancient cultures have a lot more understanding of, the power of vibration to heal. And so, because the harp, it has a um, very specific tonality and vibration that actually very much mimics almost like the vibration of the human body. It's very close. I think cello is also very close. But harp in particular, you would know whenever you see a harp, or people experience a harp, they immediately are drawn to them. I don't know whether it's all the old mythology around the harps and angels and things like that. Imagine me walking into a palliative care ward and my name tag says Angela and I've got a harp, and you know, so it's people have a lot of very healing connotations with harp in particular.
Yes.
But that's not to say that you can't use other instruments to do this work, although when I first came to the work, obviously, as I said, I was a flautist. Very, not just to toot my horn, but I was very good at what I did. But I realised in the very first sort of experience of going into a palliative care ward to play for people in palliative care wards with the flute, it was not the right instrument. It was not the right instrument for that environment, for bedside environment. So we've all had those experiences where, I don't know, say you've got a headache or, you're not feeling very well and and there's a sound in your environment that's irritating. We've all had that. And, if your child's in trying to practice their violin and you think, oh my God, so when you're sick, if you've got a brain tumor, if you're in pain, the flute is not it. It's just, it's not it. And the range that you have with flute normally moves up the range into sort of higher pitch type. That's where it starts to sing and be beautiful. But in those types of environments, it's a little too much.
Yeah, it's a bit too almost like an invasive sound. Is that the right word for it?
Yeah, it's like it can be for ill people. It can be irritating, the pitch.
Yeah, it can be piercing.
Maybe I did take Native American flutes in one time. They've got a beautiful that timbre, that low woody sort of a sound, much more relaxing, a lot better. But I very quickly realised that I had no range of movement with flute in a palliative care ward. So lucky me, my friend Julie had 2 harps. She had 2 tiny harps at the time. I'd never played harp before. But she said, why don't you loan my harp and, see what happens. I thought, well, I've been a professional musician most of my life. Obviously, I knew how to read music, do whatever. So I sat down and literally taught myself how to play the harp. And
that's what I did last weekend.
as you do, and I say to everyone out there, I'm not here to say that I'm an extraordinary concert harpist, not at all, but certainly I'm a very effective therapeutic harpist. And you don't have to be anyone who's sitting there thinking to themselves, oh, I've always wanted to play the harp. You can certainly buy small harps that are very effective, very beautiful sounding for those types of environments. Could even be an aged care facility, or it could be neonates that you like, or could be any type of environment that you're wanting to affect change. You can certainly learn the harp 100%. They're very forgiving. I literally went in, I think maybe it might have taken me 2 months to get to the point where I thought, okay, I'm ready to go in with my harp now. And I think I had one piece, and it was I think it was called Richard the Lionheart, very old 12th century English piece. Simple, and I think I might have used one finger. That's how early days it was. And I went in and sat with this little old lady named Joy, and she cried. At first, I didn't know whether she was crying because it was that bad or whether it was that good. But no, she had tears coming down her face.
Really, she could run from the room.
And it's not like she could have said. So I'm thinking, is it that good or is it that bad? But no, she cried through the whole thing and just experienced it like the most amazing thing. And I thought, this is just incredible. Almost like the harp would say, just put your hands on me and let me do the work. Let me do the work. And had a beautiful experience with her over, maybe 4 or 5 different meetings, going in and sitting with her up until when she passed away. And it was hilarious. I came in, I think it was the last time I saw her, I walked in the room and her son nearly fell off his chair because she'd been telling him about the angel named Angela that was coming in with a harp. And he thought, when does no one ever, you don't see harps. Like,
He thought that she was seeing things or something.
He thought that the morphine was so when I walked in the actual room, he couldn't believe. He said, I thought she was going crazy. But no, I was a real harpist coming in. So
did he actually take some of his mother's good drugs or something?
Yeah, he thought it was hilarious. He literally nearly fell off his seat. It was so funny. And of course, then she passed away, and that then started this whole other area of being invited to funerals and ceremonies and vigils. So Joy's family rang and said, Joy absolutely adored you, and it literally transformed her journey of transitioning to the other side. And we'd love it if you'd come and play for her funeral. And so since then, you know, I've been doing this since 2006, 2005, 2006. I can't just countless funerals, life celebrations, vigils. I've been invited into hospitals after the fact, after the person has passed away, to come and sit with the family in vigil around the person that's passed. And so there is this real opportunity, as much as it can seem like, oh my goodness, a lot of your work is very dark. Even in kinesiology, I tend to, it's not necessarily my focus, but I tend to be quite good at working with trauma. Like, it's one of my specialties is working with trauma, and a lot of the, you know, the darkness that we all have within us that we want to be able to heal or move through. I seem to have just a way of being in dark moments and be quite fine with it. Very sad moments, very upsetting moments, very challenging moments, and I feel like I'm like the best version of myself in those moments, which is wonderful.
Yeah, that's really good, because some people would
Yeah.
say, like, I can hear the questions, because I know that a lot of people, especially in the Western world, I feel like in the
Yeah.
Western world we are very, it's very clinical, and we're very separated from death. We kind of keep it
Yes.
at arm's length, and we
Yes.
don't really like to talk about it or think about it, and
Yes.
we, yeah, we really don't. And so I feel like sometimes people think that, would think, oh, going into situations like that, is that really depressing, or, you know,
Yes.
does it sort of bring you down or make you feel depressed, or, you know, is it awful, you know? And that would be a question that a lot of people would ask. So what is your
Yeah.
response to that?
Oh my goodness. I feel like I'm more alive
Mm,
when I'm sitting with people, particularly when they come into those periods where they're actively dying.
mm,
Although I've spent lots of time with people as they're in the progression of being, you know, quite cognitive and being able to talk with me about how they're feeling and all those types of things. So I've always felt like, as I walk into an environment with a dying person, that it's like this field that's buzzing with life,
mm,
because that person is so aware of their mortality,
mm,
that it's like there's this crackle
mm,
in the room.
mm,
And I found, when I was sometimes, I spend a lot of my work in Calvary Healthcare in Cogra, out of Cogra,
mm,
because they've got a fabulous, absolutely fabulous palliative palliative care sort of program there,
mm,
and their second floor is all palliative. So I'm not sure how many beds were there, but I'm sure maybe 40 or 50 to 100. I'm not sure. A
mm,
lot of palliative beds in that hospital. So whenever I would go up to the second floor, pretty well everyone on that floor was at different stages of their journey, and I would find that there would be this anticipation, you know, as you would come onto the wards. I would often sit for maybe half an hour at the nurses' station,
mm.
and my postman's just there if you can hear some noise. He's just calling
That's
out.
okay.
Apologies for that. Yeah, so I would come and sit at the nurses' station for about half an hour and try and just downgrade and just settle into the instrument, because I'd be, you know, in traffic for at least an hour.
Mhm,
And the harp is the type of instrument where the one instrument I've played many instruments over time, where it says, you know what, don't think you can go from chaos thinking, from busyness, from tension and stress to playing me effectively.
mm,
It's like it says, okay, you need to just sit with me for a minute, and you need to
mm,
meet me where I'm at, and it's not wherever
mm.
you've been in the traffic. So
Yeah.
I'd have to come and sit down and just play and feel like, you know, cortisol levels come down, and you just
Yes.
relax into the instrument and then allow it. And of course the nurses and everyone else would be like, oh, and the whole environment starts to do, because they're stressed as well.
Yeah, yeah.
And then I'd say to myself, okay, um, let's see where we go. And I'd just pick the harp up.
Mm,
Sometimes I'd start to walk down the hall, and a nurse would, you know, they started to get to know how I worked. They got to know who needed the help where I could help them, and I'd get a hoy, or I might see a family member and say, "Oh, could you come in here?" Or you'd sort of just get guided, and then sit with the person, play, and usually, the playing might be anywhere from 15, 20 minutes to an hour, depending on what was going on in the room. And then I would just put it down, and that person would just unload and talk or cry or get really angry. But often they would just want to talk about their lives. I was this almost like an invisible person who had no agenda. I'd walk in and play. I didn't even have to, because I was an intuitive player, I didn't come in and go, "What music do you want?" They didn't have to think what they wanted. Didn't have to, consider whether they want this song or that song. I'd just sit with them and go, "Just relax." And I would watch their body, do what we have to do, finish, and then they would usually just talk about all the things that they feel they couldn't say to their family.
Yes.
Or their friends, because even the dying person doesn't want to upset everyone by saying, "I'm afraid to die."
Yeah.
"I'm actually happy to die. I'm looking forward to dying." There's no way they could say that maybe to their family members, because then they'd say, "Why would you say that? We don't want you to die."
Yeah.
So I think it was this privileged, I felt privileged is how I felt with dying people. I never felt that it was weird or dark or uncomfortable. Maybe sometimes there might have been slight discomfort depending on a reaction that a client might have. But mostly it was just a privilege to be in this crucible of their rebirth.
Yeah.
Like a midwife.
Yeah. Yeah. I
Yeah.
understand what you're saying. I haven't done nearly as much time as you in those environments, but
Yeah.
when Mum was in palliative care, she was in palliative care for, I think it was about 23 days. And I was there almost every one of those days, and I stayed a couple of nights as well. And I know what you're saying about the energy. There is something about the energy in palliative care, and it's not all bad, or like it's
No.
not, and it's actually quite something I've said before that kind of might sound rather strange, but I feel almost like I birthed my mother into death.
Yes.
Sort of thing, like, so I
Yes.
felt like this profound experience where, like, I
Yes.
helped her pass.
Yes.
So she birthed me into life and I birthed her into death. That's kind of how I
Yes.
describe it, and it kinda doesn't
Yeah.
make sense, but it sort of does make sense, and it feels like a very there's all the other emotions and things like that, but at the time, it just feels like a very profound shift that happens. But yeah, it's hard. Yeah, it's really, really hard for me to describe it. But what you're saying, you understand it.
I do, and that's what a gift that you gave your mother, a profound gift. And
Yeah.
I think if I could do anything on this planet, um, you know, it would be that. It's
Mm.
there's something so beautiful about helping someone to move through that transition. And I
Yes.
guess
Yeah.
everybody's different in how that they want to do it. And
Mm.
it all depends, I think, sometimes on where they're at in, their pain levels,
Yes.
um, how much they've dealt with it. Sometimes if people have got a lot of bitterness, um, or they're angry, or they're not coping with the
Mm.
reality of how it is, it can, I've noticed over time that their passing can be more challenging, more
Mm.
painful.
Yes.
But then I've seen other people who literally, I've, kind of, normal meetings with them, sit down, play, and then we'd get to 2 days or 24 hours before their passing, and you'd walk in the room and it was like luminous.
Mm.
And like it sounds a little bit fluffy or almost spiritual, but it's like they're like light coming through their eyes. If they're blue-eyed, it was like they were bright. They had lots of
Mm.
energy. They were really positive, and it's like this. They're sort of, you know, um, flipping in and out of two realities. It's just absolutely extraordinary. Starting
Yeah.
to see other people in the room,
Yeah, that's the thing, like, I don't know, obviously people have different beliefs around these things and
yeah,
all the rest of it, and I respect that people have whatever
yes,
is right for them, but in the way I would describe it, personally, the way I perceive it is, yes, that they are in like, you see that when they've got one foot on either side,
yeah,
basically.
Yes.
And there's something about that. You just see different signs and things that kind of make you go, oh, wow, you kind of do know there is something on the others, whatever it
Oh,
is.
yeah.
But you can sort of see when people do have kind of one foot already. And I don't mean
Yes.
it in a nasty way. Sometimes it is
No,
like you see it and it's actually a beautiful thing that you're witnessing, where you see that.
absolutely.
When you've got, yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Mm,
And I think the beauty of being able to go in as a harpist, number one, uh, and well, as a musician, but just as a human being, like often I
mm,
would just enjoyed walking in that room as a
mm,
human being and sitting with someone playing.
mm,
Our particular art is the art of learning specifically one on one. So, as much as there were times where I'd be invited to come into a lounge room on the palliative care ward, and there'd be a dozen people sitting around having cups of tea or hand massages. I
mm,
really have to give a lot of credit to Anne-Marie Traynor, who was I'm not sure if she still is, she may still be the head of the volunteer department at Cogra at
mm,
that time. She ran an extremely effective and strong volunteer palliative environment there. So
mm,
there were people who would come and do hand massages with essential oils. There were hairdressers who would come around and do hair. There were people who come and do facials or whatever. There were storytellers. There were people who retired
mm,
journalists or people who'd written books and authors and things like that would come in and help the dying people to write their story to present to their family at the end. So they'd come and sit with them and talk with them and make notes or record their stories and then present their families with this beautiful My Life book at the incredibly creative ways of working with people to help them, journey through their transition of passing.
mm,
And the way we as therapeutic musicians are trained to work is to come in and meet you where you're at and have no expectations of you. There's no agenda in terms of I'm going to walk in and go, right, these are my plans for you in the session today, and these are what the things
mm.
that I want to achieve. Which,
Yeah.
not saying that's bad. And sometimes with music therapy, there can be more of a okay. So we've got sort of there's plans and there's
Mm,
integrating. I've got certain types of goals that I'd like to be able to make with this person. Could be functionality wise or whatever, but
mm,
our goal is just to walk in and meet the person where they're at in their environment.
mm,
And for me personally, that meant learning any pieces that I played at the bedside, whether they be ancient ones or I'd have to learn them by heart.
mm,
Understand your modes really well so that you had them at your fingertips so you could move in and out of them while you focused on the person.
mm,
9 times out of 10 in the palliative ward, as you would have experienced, they can't really communicate. They're at the point where they may not be able to communicate.
mhm,
So our whole work would be to sit and connect with the person. So watch their
mhm,
breathing, watch the facial color, as I was saying before. What are their hands doing? What is their
mm.
heart rate, if you can measure it?
Yes.
Um, all of those things help us to see, you might be in this mode, that mode, flipping around a little bit. And then you notice when you come into something, the person, their hands unfurl. And
Mhm.
one little tear might come down, particularly people with motor neurons and things like that. They can't even move. And
Yes.
you'd see this one little tear come down. You think, okay. And then you having that ability to um, lean into whatever that is. So it may
Mm,
be the person starts sobbing. Some
mm,
people might think that's actually not helpful.
mm,
But from my experience,
mm.
that person deeply needed to sob.
Yeah.
So, and you would get a sense of, is this sobbing that's painful? So do we need to shift it and lighten things up a little bit? Or
Mm.
do we lean into this and allow them to crack open
Yeah.
and just allow that cathartic experience to happen?
Yeah. So you were
Um,
able to sense which
yeah,
it was and which way to go
just
with
by
it.
you just watch you want to be able to, I would never want to take my eyes off the person and just be playing. And you get this sense of like, okay, we're in a rhythm here. And we would often use things like entrainment. So the specific skills that we're taught as therapeutic musicians, one being entrainment. And a good example of an entrainment experience that I had, which was absolutely extraordinary, it was a woman in her 40s who was dying of cancer. And I was playing for someone else at the time anyway. A nurse came in and said, oh, a family's requested that you come down. We've done everything for this lady. She's been passing for days and days and days and days and hanging on and hanging on. I don't know if you've ever known those people who are like, they should have been gone by now. They've had enough morphine to, you know, they can't understand why they're still hanging on. And of course, the question is, are they waiting for someone? Is there something that they need to complete before they're ready? Like all the normal
Yeah,
questions.
and a lot of especially mothers, I think, would be hanging on for if they've got children. So
Exactly.
in her 40s, her children, if she had them, would have been relatively young, I suppose. So it's that
Exactly.
as well. I think if they've got people that they feel like they need to stay there for,
Exactly.
or if people want them to stay.
Yes,
So if they've got
exactly.
family there, a friend of mine gave me this example. Well, Linda Campbell, she we did an episode on grief and death, and I think she told a story I think of maybe. I can't remember what story she told, so I won't go into the full detail, but put it this way, one relative saying to the other relative, "Don't go, don't go, don't go." And
Yes.
so if you've got that
Yes.
going on, it also would make it very hard
Yes.
to go. Mm,
Absolutely. And I can't tell you how many people would come and say to me, you know what, it's so strange. I walked out of the room to make a cup of tea and they went. I,
mm,
I went to the bathroom and they went. I've been
mm.
sitting here for days and days and days, 24 hours a day, 7 days
Yeah,
a week. I wouldn't leave them because I don't want them to be alone when they go.
yeah, yeah,
And the minute I stepped out to ask for something, it's like, I think that connection sometimes is so strong that
that
they
they
don't
can't.
want to go while you're there. They
Yeah, yeah.
can't.
Yeah, I've had palliative
Um,
care nurses say that to me as well, and so
yeah,
we sort of had one point where we would leave the room regularly and give mum a break from us as well, but also
yeah,
a chance of like, okay, she needs to be without us, but
that's
then
right.
we would go back in as well. But
Yeah,
we also kinda just we told her that it was okay to go, like, we actually just
yeah.
said, "It's
I
okay to
think
go,"
that's
or,
important.
you know.
I
Yeah.
think that's important. And I had that exact same experience with my own father. I think he resisted and resisted and resisted. And in the end, I had to have a conversation with him and say, you know what, Dad,
Mm.
it's okay. Like, it's okay to
Yeah.
go. And I know you're probably, I thought he's probably worried about this and this and this and this and the planes and the this and the, we've got it. I'll sort it. We'll
Yeah,
sort it.
yeah.
It's going to
I
be
had the same
okay.
thing with mum. I had to just tell her those things that I was
Yes.
probably worried about my sister and my brother and this and that and
Yes.
whatever, and she was worried about me, and so I was like, you know, this no. So I kind of went through all the things of this is sorted and this is happening here and this is,
Yes.
you know, I just told her all the things that you would
Yeah.
normally tell someone who was
Yeah.
worried about the situation. This
Yeah.
is sorted, that's sorted, this is sorted, that's
Yeah.
sorted. You can go when you're ready. It's all right. You can just let all that go now. It's all sorted. And then
Everything's going to
it's
be
like, you
okay.
know, and my aunt and my grandma had already passed, so I just kept telling her that, you know, she can go to them when she's ready, that sort of thing. But yeah, sometimes that she just need to be told, look, it's all okay. You can put it down, you
It's
know.
all okay. I'm going to sort those things that you're probably thinking, oh my goodness, what's going to happen with that and what's going to happen with this.
Yeah.
And, you know, a very short side story when my dad passed away, which was, I
Mm,
find absolutely hilarious, and I'm sure he would
mm,
too. So he hung on and hung on and hung on. I had that conversation with him. And
mm,
then I just remember turning away from the bed to look, because he was in Orange Base Hospital, to look out at the, you know, they had a nice view actually, quite a nice view. Look out the
mm,
window, and 30 seconds as I walked, I looked away, looked back, and a nurse was coming in the room to put
mm,
those really big adult size nappies on, you know,
mm,
because, you know, as we know, as we come to close to passing, you know, we lose our bodily functions and things like that. And
mm,
my dad was old school, and he certainly wouldn't be into wearing an adult size nappy. And we had a really
mm.
good, almost dark sense of humor at times where we could laugh at laugh at things. And I turned and I said, "Well, Dad, you better get going. They're about to put these, you know, big nappies on you. You better look out." And I kid you not, that he took his last breath. I think he
Wow.
totally agreed. I said, "You better look out. They're coming in with these big nappies," and that was it.
I'm out of
I
here.
thought, he's like, "You know what? You've convinced me. I'm done." So I still laugh about that and think the final thing that I said to my dad, you know, was, "You better look out. They're coming for you with those big nappies," you know. And some people
Yeah,
might even find that offensive, but he and I had, that was the relationship that we had,
yeah,
where we could have a dig and have a laugh. But
yeah.
ultimately, yes. So coming back around to that 40-year-old lady.
Mm,
So I'm invited to come in, and the room was filled, and I'm talking maybe 20 people all standing around this woman's bed.
mm,
And people holding her hand each side, her husband on
No
one
wonder she was
side,
having trouble letting go then with
right?
those people, I
Just
can imagine.
surrounded, and everyone's saying, look, she's suffering and she's been hanging on. She hasn't been able to communicate for days and days and days.
Mm.
And we're ready for her to go. And, we've done it. Everyone's come, everyone's here. There's nothing that we can think of. Is there, any way that the music can help to relax her to go? And I said, well, are you ready for her to go? And they said, yes. And I said, okay, because I'm not called the angel of death in here for no reason. I'd be walking around because in the end, often I'd come in and I'd play and people would
Mm.
pass.
Mm.
And so as much as, people would have a laugh at me and say, was it that good or that bad? But
The
that's
Grim
what would
Reaper.
happen. Right? So you'd come in and whether the music just helped to relax them to a
Yeah.
point where they could finally let go, I don't know. But I said to them, look, I do have a reputation. So if you're ready, then do you want me to explain what we're going to do? And they said, yeah. And it was actually so fabulous because this whole room of people were almost upbeat about it. They were ready and they're like, we just want to support her to have the best passing that she can have. So, okay, we're going to do this thing called entrainment. And what entrainment is that we actually are going to, so she was in active dying, which I don't know if your mum did this, but often it's almost like this breathing that can become quite rattly.
Yeah.
And quite disturbing for most people find that really disturbing.
It sounds really hard, and it is. It's quite if you feel quite stressed listening to it, and the nurses say, "Oh no, it's fine," but it feels
Yeah.
like it's really hard for them.
Yeah.
Yes.
And it sounds like there's fluid in the lung or something, and
Yes.
all that kind of thing.
Mm.
So, it's one of those things that I think of all the things that upset people, it's number one, seeing someone suffer. That's not
Yeah.
nice. Having,
Yes.
and for me, obviously, my own father, that was harder than obviously just a person and a different person I didn't know. But so we're going to do this thing called entrainment, which means basically I'm going to match her breathing. So if her breathing for that person, this kind of thing going on, and it's repetitive like a freight train, it just goes and goes and goes and goes. So what we're going to do is I'm going to start playing and I'm going to match the rhythm of her breathing. And it might take me 10, 15 minutes to get into like where musicians will know, some people might know when they're listening to a particular piece of music and they get into it's like something that locks when you're truly in a like a momentum, or it's like this beautiful synergy of rhythm. So
In the
we get
zone.
into that, it's like in a zone, right? So we match, I'll match rhythm with her, and then what we'll do over maybe a 15-minute period is I'm going to really slowly drag back. I'm going to slow down ever so, like, not even noticeably. And without fail, people follow you. So, you're playing like this, and then you slowly slow down to the point where you get down to maybe just ringing out one note. Whatever that note, you play around a little bit and you find that there's one particular boom, you might hit on a D or something and just let it ring out. And even slow that down to the point where it's completely arrhythmic. And this woman went from freight train within, 20, 30-minute period to literally, into all this silence, and you imagine. And so often when you break into that with the music and it's like people get really present, the silence is so loud, it's deafening. There's like this silence in the room that's like, it would happen to me, not every time, but every now and then you'd sit with someone and get them to that place where they were ready to pass, and you'd be ringing out that one note and the silence was so loud. And you can see everyone standing on the edge of, like, they're on. And so she'd be like, and then it might be maybe 30 seconds between breaths. And then it would go to maybe 40 seconds in between breaths and just letting that ring out again, to the point where we're all standing there like holding our breath, thinking, is this it? Like almost like watching like a on the edge of your seat television series. And we thought it had been a good minute or a minute and a half, and everyone just breathed out and went, oh, that's it. Like it was just all this relief, but smiles, right? oh my God, that was incredible. And then she goes, right, after everyone, and then, of course, they broke out in hysterics. They
Yes.
broke out in hysterics, right? And they said, that'll be right. She always had to have the last word. And apparently she had a habit of just when you think, you got the she would come in. The whole room is in just hysterics, laughing and holding each other and crying with laughter. And then, of course, that was her last breath. And the joy in that room, I'm not here to say that it was because of me, but collectively what we created in that room was transforming that woman's final moments from one of, extreme grief and sadness and pain, not to say that they won't also continue to go through their grief. But the feedback I would get from people after the fact in cards or phone calls or at their funerals was just like, that just changed my mother's transition into this magical moment that I'll never forget. And that just happened over and over and over in all these different ways, whether it be sometimes people in hysterics and laughing, sometimes it was people crying, but it was something where the tears would come in this wholesome, like, otherworldly way that helped people to free from the pain of the passing, more so just feeling the emotion and the beauty, bringing the beauty back to death, because actually death can be stunningly beautiful.
Yeah, it's one of those things that is kind of beautiful and ugly at the same time, if you know what I mean.
Yes, I
There's
do know
the
what you
ugliness
mean.
and the physicalness of it,
Yes.
and sometimes the physicalness can be not not nice, but
Yes.
there's also a beauty and ethereal some other level beauty there at
Something
the same time.
that's so well said. And, I often think about when my grandmother did pass. I wasn't there when she died, but obviously as soon as she did, pass away, I made my way there and I said to my dad, I want to go see her at the have a viewing, right? No one else wanted to have a viewing. And I don't know why, but the maybe the funeral parlour just didn't expect to have a viewing, so they didn't do the normal work that they would do to have someone look presentable for a viewing, right? Now, at that stage, I had not seen a die. I mean, I was only in my 20s at that time, so I'd not seen a person die. I hadn't been introduced to death.
Yes.
I don't think I'd even seen someone in a viewing at that stage. And my grandmother, my father's mother, was like this angelic little old lady who I'm sure she fancied herself to be the queen. She just looked like, had that hair and wore that kind of clothes. She was just angelic and beautiful. And so I said, no, I've got to go see her. I've got to go say my goodbye. So it was my first experience of seeing a person dead in death. And so we go to this funeral parlour. And the gentleman said, oh, just so you know, Mum's not looking very good, so prepare yourself for that. I thought, how bad could it be? Well, my only way to describe what I saw when I walked in that door and they opened that coffin was, that painting, The Scream? The one with the person with their mouth open and their face, and they're on a pier or something. I think it's called The Scream, but I can't put.
I think it is.
Yeah, and my grandmother, because they didn't put her teeth in, they didn't close her mouth, her eyes were open.
Yes.
And it was all that death can, the worst that death can look like, or not the worst, but what it can look like, right?
Yeah, it was quite confronting.
And I just remember being so traumatized by that. So I just sobbed because it not because she was dead, but because I couldn't recognize her.
Yeah.
And it just looked like a horror. It looked to me like a horror film. And it was horrible, a horrible experience, right? And the interesting thing about it was I remembered years later, after I'd been inspired to, interestingly, continue with palliative work, after that experience, I thought I wanted to continue to do it. And I was in my early days of training with the certification, and we had to do quite a lot of clinical hours at the bedside to be certified.
Mm.
And I was invited to go into a room with a woman who had no family, and really common, no family, no loved ones. She was alone. And they said, "Oh, would you go sit with this woman? She's basically, she's active. She could go anytime.
Mm.
Would you like to go sit with her?" So I went in, and the minute I walked in that door, it was this woman. She was still alive, but
Mm.
she looked exactly like my grandmother looked that day.
Mm.
And I remember just feeling, all of the body just going, "Oh, what," you're remembering that trauma and going through that, and how confronting it is. Like, it's
Yes.
really confronting. Like, the one thing about death is like how
Mm.
extraordinarily confronting it is.
Yeah.
And to walk in and feel confronted and to sit down and I just remember even asking it's like, "You know what, Nan, thank you for giving me the opportunity to I've already seen this before.
Mm.
And now I can be here for this woman who's still here in a
Yeah.
way that I couldn't be for her at the time."
Yeah.
And just sat and played, and I think I cried because I
Mm.
felt like I was releasing all of those associations with the ugliness of death,
Yes. Mm.
the ugliness of death,
Mm.
and how fearful we are of death.
Mm.
We're terrified of a dying
Yeah.
body.
Mm.
Um, to the point where I'd often, I had a few experiences where I'd have my little harp and I'd jump into the lift to go up to the second floor, and
Mm.
there could be staff that have not met me before. They might be coming in, just, replacement staff or something, didn't know who I was. And they're like, "Oh, where are you going?" "Oh, I'm going up to level 2. And they'd say, "But they're dying up there." I say, "They're currently living up there."
Mm.
So, there was this undercurrent of, "Why would you do that? They're dying." Or,
Mm.
"They're not communicating anymore, so what's the point?" Or,
Mm.
um, all of those things that would come with it. So I guess what the harp or the music would actually help to do is just to help to bring that palette of color,
Mm.
and beauty and dignity
Yes. Mm.
back to a human being, that, as much as we can physically be, you know, not looking our best, let's say that,
Yes.
but there's certainly something very unconditional in being present to that and seeing the beauty beyond that, which is what I think any of the arts with palliative can do. Actually, the
Mm.
Irish do palliative care very well. They understand that you need the bard,
Mm.
and the poet,
Yes.
at the bedside. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
And actually, I feel like in some ways it might sound a bit weird, but uh, birth and death are similar in that way. In that I think birth can be quite ugly. I've been present for two births; can be quite ugly, and also amazing and beautiful and life changing,
yeah,
and all of these beautiful things
yeah,
at the same time. So I just think it's either end. At either end, there's kind of this realness and potential ugliness to it, but there's also this beauty or this hard to put your finger on thing that is bigger than any. It's do you know that something is happening that's way bigger than you, that's way bigger than anything, and that's way more powerful than
yeah.
anything? Like, it's
I
just that
think so.
awareness. And I don't know if it's because at both ends you're also there's a portal opening kind of thing, and at both ends,
Yes,
so there's a connection with the other side or something. I don't know what it is, but there's something that's quite feels quite momentous or quite big at either end of those experiences.
absolutely.
Mm.
And I think, yeah, I think it's, to me, some of the best hours of my life have been sitting with people who are dying,
Mm.
and like just their bravery, and that, I don't know, I suppose I've just always been that person that was never necessarily afraid to ask our hard questions,
Mm.
because of like just my fascination. And so I'd sit with someone and say,
Mm.
"What does it feel like to die?" Or, what do you
Mm.
think about?" Or,
Mm.
like trying to put yourself in their shoes and understand. Or, they'd sit and tell you stories about their life or their
Mm.
regrets, like all of the things that they would regret. And it's usually never the things that we think we would regret. Like,
Mm.
it's a bit cliche, but it's like they're never regretting making more, not making enough money,
Yes.
or all those different things. there's usually a lot of regrets around, gosh, why did I worry so much? And why did I stress out so much about life? And why did I,
Yeah. Why did I
you
worry
know,
so much about things that didn't matter, that kind of
that
thing?
didn't, yeah, they really didn't matter. And so I had like just lots of teachers.
Mm.
So in that way where they tell you, but obviously the music is also wonderful we talked about neonates as well. I spent some time at Westmead
Mm.
in the neonate ward.
Mm.
And that was fabulous because in palliative you don't have a lot of the electrical assistance. So, heart rates or oxygen monitors and things like that. So you can see all sorts of deeper ways that the music is helping. But to come in and sit with, little babies in the NICU who, you sort of go, oh, wow, like sitting and playing various pieces and noticing their blood oxygen levels increasing, as we're sitting with them. Some of the babies, I had experiences where you probably know that some babies find it hard to suckle or to, having trouble to suckle and things like that. And of course, I'd come and sit, and the nurses were like, "Don't leave yet," because as soon as I'd stop playing, they'd stop suckling.
Oh,
All
okay.
these just beautiful experiences where you just realise like the music just helps to calm people,
Yeah.
center people. But I'm here to tell you, it's not all rainbows and unicorns at times.
Yes.
I have had people. You imagine if you're on your death's door. To this day, I often ask myself, how will I be? Will I be angry? Will
Mm.
I be bitter? Will I be scared? And a
Mm.
lot of people are probably all of those things. And I remember one experience. I came into a 4-bedded room, and that's why we often really like to be able to, in most circumstances, try to have it be a one-on-one service,
Mm.
because as you can imagine, each and every person has different needs.
Yeah.
They're in
Yeah,
different
definitely.
moods, they're in
Mm.
different stages, they're in different
Mm.
pain levels.
Yes.
And someone who's feeling down, I
Mm.
wouldn't want to necessarily come in and start playing a piece that's in a mode that sounds a little minor or a little bit sad or something like that. So, and vice versa, sometimes someone who actually really needs a good cry don't want to hear anything merry. They're thinking, this is just, irritating.
Yeah.
So I came into a 4-bedded room, which is not always ideal because then you've got other people in the space.
Mm.
And this young man invited me to play for his mother, who hadn't been able to sleep from what he said. Look, she has not slept for a week. She's just
Mm.
constantly groaning and sighing and in pain and
Mm.
suffering on almost like on a spiritual level. There's
Mm.
like a spiritual suffering.
Yes.
And so we said, okay, let's come in and see what we can do. And he decided to sit at her feet and massage her
Mm.
feet. And I
Mm.
came and sat by her, and we
Mm.
started to play. And it took us about half an hour, but she started to go off to sleep. And he's sitting at her feet going, oh
Mm.
my God. Like you could see he was elated because for the first time, drugs wouldn't help, this wouldn't help,
Mm.
but she was going off to sleep. And we're both like, oh my God,
Mm.
this is fabulous. Anyhow, to our great dismay, diagonally, there was an elderly woman, and out of nowhere, she said, or she didn't just say, she screamed, "You are torturing me,"
Mm.
right?
Wow.
And you could feel the whole, because everyone else in the room were like, because there was families and people who were quite
Yeah.
enjoying it, they were fine
Mm.
with it. And because we're getting results with this lady, but whatever I was doing for this lady
Having the opposite effect on the other lady.
was it was stirring something up. Now,
Yeah, yeah.
understandably, it could have been stirring up her pain.
Mm.
It could have been stirring up her sadness, her fear.
Yes.
I don't know, but she was really, really angry, and
Mm.
then I'm experiencing feeling torn, thinking this woman's about to get results, but I don't. If I continue to stay here and do this, it's going to
Yes.
upset the whole room.
Yeah.
So I just said, okay, I understand. I'll be finished in a moment, and you know, and because she sat there with a red face and turning around and everything. I just thought, oh my goodness, like that was confronting and painful for me, because here I am with my heart on my sleeve, sitting here
Yeah.
playing harp for this woman and this woman was livid
Mm. Mm.
about it. So there are days where that happens, and bit by bit you come to the place where you can understand, you know what, that's
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah,
She,
the truth is that our help isn't always needed or wanted or the right thing at the right
that's right,
time, and it's just knowing
that's
that
right,
that's just not always gonna be everyone's cup of tea.
that's
Um,
exactly right.
I'm just, I'm really aware of time, but
Of
it's been so
course.
interesting. I've been wanting to
I
keep this
know.
going because it's so
Well,
interesting.
if we
One
get
thing I
some interest, we might be able to do a part B sometime
Yeah,
and talk a
yeah,
little bit more about
that
it.
would be really great. Look, one thing that I really appreciate about palliative care, about end of life, is it is so real. And
Yeah.
that's a bad thing about it, but it's a good thing about it because usually by the time people get there, it's very real.
Oh, yeah.
And so all the pretenses are gone. It doesn't matter actually whether you were a billionaire or whether you were famous or whether you were the best looking person or whether, like, it doesn't matter. None of that matters. It's kind of the great equalizer, isn't it? Because
It sure is.
once you get there, it's just it's largely real, and sometimes that means bad, as in that lady, and
Yeah.
not bad necessarily, but just a not pleasant experience for you. And sometimes
Yeah.
that means lots of beautiful conversations and insights and lots of
Yeah.
beautiful experiences
Oh,
as
like
well. But it's very real.
99.999% of
Mm,
my experiences were
yeah.
extraordinary. And there
Yes.
were a few. There were a few. I had one lady who, every time I hadn't even gone into her room, but every time I walked past, she'd go, "There's that effing harpist again." And I thought, oh my God. And I ended up having to have, so I'm talking to one of the bereavement ladies out there. So, oh
Yeah.
gosh, I don't know what to do about this lady. I don't even know her. Like, what am I, and I was taking it all personally because who
Yeah.
would, you know, because it's all about me, not the person
Mm,
dying in that room. And anyway, the lady said, "Oh, look, she has a brain tumor
mm,
and it's just what she does.
yeah. Yeah.
So I'll
Mm,
next time I'm in there and you come past." Anyway, she said some days she's sweet, no problem
mm,
whatsoever. Other days she's got something going on cognitively,
mm.
and it's not just you, it's the gardener, or it's
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
it's funny how it equalizes all of us in the room as well, because suddenly
Yeah.
I'm here going, oh, it's about me and this and that. I'm like, oh my God,
Yeah,
get off yourself.
yeah, it's not about you. There's
It's
so
not
much
about
going
you at
on
all.
there that it's like that's the thing too, it's not about us
Yeah,
anymore, and it just all the other stuff
yeah,
that doesn't matter kind of fades away when you're in that. I know my mum hated
exactly.
dogs, and they had a therapy dog that used to go around the ward, I think, and they said, "Don't don't take it into mum." And sometimes I'd take it to the
Yeah.
door, and she'd talk to them from the door. "Oh, what sort of breed is that? What sort of" but
Yeah. She's like,
she
nah.
was happy with it being at the
wasn't
door, and she was happy
wasn't
with it
her
moving
cup of
on.
tea,
No,
and
and that
that's
other
totally
people would
fine.
love the dog, you know,
Look,
so it's, you
I
know.
had a lady, like, this is the thing that used to blow my mind. There was a woman who was a music therapist, so a trained music therapist, and she would come out a couple of days a week. She had an electric keyboard, and she had this big bag full of shakers and little bangers and all sorts of whistles and bizzo. And she would go in and she had, I don't know, 4 or 5 big, thick books of music from every decade, so that she could walk in and sit down with someone and say, "What's your favorite music?" And she'd sit up
Yes.
there and play whatever they wanted, pretty
Mm.
well, like
Mm.
karaoke a bit. And I'd
Yes.
walk past the room, and this woman would have a person who was, on death's door,
Yeah.
shaking a shaker while she's singing the Beatles. And I'm like, that was my definition of hell on earth. I couldn't think of anything worse personally, right? Although she had them, they were loving it, they were
Yeah,
enjoying
they were
it,
loving it. Yeah.
right?
Yep.
And we often would meet in the hallways, and because I would always go in musicless, like
Yes.
I didn't want to have the music get in the way of
Yeah.
what the connection.
Mm.
Two totally different ways of working. She
Mm.
she had great results with how she worked, but I couldn't
Yeah.
think of anything worse. And then she
Yeah.
often would say to me, "How do you walk in there without a stitch of music? That's
Mm.
terrifying."
Yeah.
And so she would often say to me, "How do you do that? How isn't
Mm.
that? What are you doing in there? How does that work?" So we
Mm.
all have our nuances and our ways of
Yeah.
working, which are really great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And do you actually still do this work?
Yes.
You
So,
do? Mm.
not as regularly out in the bigger hospitals, but because I guess the word gets around.
Mm.
I get a lot of private calls now, so I'll have people call me. Sometimes I'll go down to a hospital in North Shore, sometimes Blacktown, sometimes
Mm.
depends where people make the call to come.
Mm.
Obviously, there's people who know me, family, friends, whatever. I'll come and do that work,
Mm.
and I'm hoping, because I know Penrith is opening a brand new palliative unit next year, I think it is, sometime, or
Okay.
it's being built. We don't
Mm.
actually have, would you believe, a palliative specific unit in Penrith. And I find that absolutely mind boggling.
Mm.
but they're building one.
Anyone listening elsewhere, that's a suburb in the Western Sydney that's huge. It's so much well, it's a city really now. It is a
Yeah,
city.
yeah.
And it is, if no palliative care there, that seems
It's so
ridiculous.
there's
Yeah.
palliative, but it's not like they have a dedicated unit or ward. So they'll have wards that obviously have palliative people in them, but different to how the incredible wards up in Cogra, where it was definitely palliative dedicated.
Yes, yeah.
So they're building one in Penrith, and I've thrown my hat over the wall to say, hey, this could be incredible for Penrith.
Yes, yeah,
Have me
definitely.
come in and do the work. Obviously, just for me, going to the hospitals that really support the work. To get out to Cogra, we're talking a 2 hour trip out there and a 2 hour trip, and it just gets too
Yes.
much when you're trying to run clinic and all the rest. So
Yeah.
now I do a lot of one-on-one, called in, like that sort of thing. A lot of funerals, a lot of ceremonies. I'm brought in by places like Warrenora, eastern suburbs, to do a lot of their candle lighting ceremonies and things like that. Just, I guess, when you come onto that side of the industry where it's all about death and dying, that's where all your gigs come from.
Yeah.
So people say, "Gosh, all your gigs are pretty morbid." Like, no, they're fabulous, and they're an honour, and they're beautiful.
So if
So
people want
yeah,
to get hold of you, how I'll put your details in the show notes.
yes,
What's
yes,
the one or two
easiest
examples you
way.
can give?
Yeah. So you can find me on Facebook as Angela Sciberras, my name, or the Kinesiologist with a Z. So
Yeah. The
Instagram the
kinesiologist
same.
with a
The
Z. Angela
Kinesiologist with a Z.
Sciberras? How do you
Angela
spell
Sciberras.
Sciberras?
It's Sciberras. So if you Google me, you'll find me.
And I'll put all
Um,
the details in the show notes as well. So if you can't remember any of
Absolutely,
this, just go to the show notes and the links will be there.
that would
I
be
just wanna
wonderful.
thank you again for today. It's just been I've just been so interested, I didn't wanna stop, but we have to stop
Yeah,
at
I
some
know, I
point.
know, and I can go, keep going, that's for sure.
Yeah.
But thank you. It was a real privilege and a pleasure. I just
Uh,
enjoyed it so much. Thank you.
yeah, thanks. I just really appreciate interesting stories and just learning about things I don't know much about and, connecting and all of that. I love it. So thank you again.
My pleasure.
And thank you for everybody who is listening or watching at home. Please remember to like, subscribe, share, and rate this podcast so we can get more people to learn all of these, just connect with other human beings and learn so much about life and death and all of the things in between. This is a podcast about where we have real conversations about things that matter. So thank you, everyone, and I'll see you all again next week. Thanks. Bye.